Right now at the cinema, something extremely rare is going on and you probably don't even realize it. You can go to the movies and you can choose between two different theatrically released mockumentary films, like it's 2006 or something. You're probably familiar with a good chunk of the mockumentary genre. It's covered everything from Borat's Mankini to a high school drama teacher's classroom.
Thank God you're here. Grandma's been raped.
But the thing you might not realize is the genre has been through many iterations over time and stretches back decades. So let's take a look at what brought us to this particular point in time. People have been using reality formats to tell stories for decades. Before the genius Ice Cube made his cinematic masterpiece, War of the Worlds, Orson Welles had a go at adapting the story for a radio play in 1938. Welles's adaptation famously presented itself in the form of a fake news bulletin, which reportedly tricked some listeners into thinking that an alien invasion was actually occurring because people were stupid. Although the reports of people being tricked have been greatly exaggerated over the years, it shows how presenting a narrative in a form that's usually reserved for non-fiction can be an effective way of bringing a story into the real world. The first time something similar to a mockumentary really hit it big was in 1964, when the Beatles teamed up with director Richard Lester to release A Hard Day's Night. While not exactly a mockumentary, it does use a handheld cinema verite style, and all of the Beatles play themselves. The film is a very light hangout movie that mostly consists of the Beatles having fun and hanging out together and being silly, while also touching on their experience with fame and being pulled in every direction by the public and the people who want to monetize you. While I don't really know much about the Beatles, I found the film to be pretty charming, and it was a ginormous hit at the time. It also created the blueprint for more bands and musicians to do the same thing. My particular favorite of these is of course the most iconic band to ever exist, the gay version of the Beatles, ABBA. I'm a big ABBA fan, and I never knew this, but in 1977 they released the creatively titled ABBA the Movie, reportedly conceived by the band on the plane on their way to Australia. The film is half concert, half mockumentary, and follows a journalist trying to get an interview with the band while they're on their Australian tour. And in typical ABBA fashion, it even starts out with this ridiculous but amazing opening statement.
Are you sure you want me to do this documentary?
Don't use that word. It's not a documentary, it's an event. This is gonna be worldwide.
We get to see ABBA taking part in ridiculous photo ops, some vox pops from local Australians, and even Agnetha wearing a Carlton jersey. I had such a great time watching this film, and I'm really glad I found it. It's such an amazing time capsule of Australia in the 70s and really captures that ABBA mania that was going on at the time. I've also never seen a film be so scarily local than when I saw the scene of ABBA being treated like royalty at Melbourne's Mooba Parade. And if you don't know what that sentence means, don't worry about it. Also, watching their performances at the Sydney Mime Music Bowl and the Perth Entertainment Centre made me so jealous for everyone who got to experience that. The closest thing generations today get to that is seeing Pierce Brosnan in Mamma Mia. A few years later in 1984, the mockumentary as we know it today was born with the release of This Is Spinal Tap. The film follows a fictional band, Spinal Tap, as they embark on a tour to promote their new album. The film mostly consists of the band hanging out backstage, being interviewed, or on stage. It was pretty much entirely improvised and shot like a real documentary, which translates to a very nice looseness on screen, with the humor being very deadpan and silly. While the film wasn't really a hit at the box office, it became a cult favorite and popularized the form of the mockumentary. The genre kind of exploded following the release of Spinal Tap, with dozens and dozens of mockumentaries released from the late 90s into the early 2000s. Christopher Guest alone went on to make mockumentary classics like Waiting for Guffman and Best in Show, and Amy Adams went on to make her film debut in Drop Dead Gorgeous. One reason why the mockumentary genre exploded so much is because they're pretty cheap to make. Given that it's supposed to look like a documentary, it means that you don't necessarily need to pay for things like complicated lighting setups or perfect sound and camera. In a mockumentary, a mistake like showing the crew or having kind of ugly lighting actually just contributes to the realism of it. It was also around the late 90s and early 2000s that cheaper consumer video cameras hit the market, and a lot of mockumentaries were made with these. I wanted to also point out that the mockumentary is almost exclusively used for comedy, with the cheap nature of the genre allowing things like the script and the performances to really shine. shine. It also has an inbuilt meta quality that allows filmmakers to bring audiences into these niche worlds without lengthy exposition. In a mockumentary, the exposition is inbuilt to the form itself. It also allows filmmakers to highlight the ridiculousness of characters in relation to the supposedly real world around them. Like in Spinal Tap, we laugh at the band because they're supposedly real, and I'm not sure the film would really work if it was shot and presented like a traditional film. However, there's some pretty interesting exceptions to the rule of mockumentaries only being used for comedy. The Australian mockumentary horror film Lake Mungo was released in 2008 and follows a family being haunted by their deceased daughter. The film consists of interviews with the family as well as some first-hand found footage of the hauntings. It's basically a combination of documentary and found footage filmmaking and goes for a subtle and realistic approach to the storytelling. This film is quite a slow burn and it really takes its time to immerse you into the realism of the documentary. By the time things start getting pretty freaky, it feels truly real and terrifying, and it's one of the few films that have managed to give me full body chills. The film isn't really that well known and it recently got a 4K restoration, so I would highly recommend you to check it out if you haven't seen it. This is also around the time that the found footage horror genre emerged, and while I wouldn't exactly consider these films mockumentaries, they do have a bit in common with the genre. One of the first found footage horror hits, The Blair Witch Project, actually begins with the students in the film aiming to make a documentary about the titular Blair Witch. We get to see some interviews with local townspeople, and the naturalistic performances combined with the grainy and amateur camera footage really works to convince you that all of this is real. Then in 2006, probably the most successful mockumentary of the period was released. I'm talking of course about Borat. Filmed on a camcorder with a very modest budget, the film made over $200 million at the box office and became a genuine cultural phenomenon. Borat had a twist on the genre where it combined scripted scenes with improvised scenes involving unwilling members of the public, but the mockumentary element is the framing device for the film. Speaking of groundbreaking mockumentaries, I also cannot finish this video without just giving a quick shout out to Surf's Up. Of course, a genius film which is an animated mockumentary about penguins that surf. Now, it was also around this time, we'll call that the Surf's Up period, that a pretty significant shift began to occur. The mockumentary started to move from film to primarily television, and it's Ricky Gervais's fault. While I do hate the guy, I will admit that his first seasons of The Office are quite good. The US version of the show obviously went on to become one of the biggest TV shows of all time, and it's probably what most people think of when they think of a mockumentary. The show was so big that it inspired many international versions, got its own spin-off, and opened the door for other mockumentary TV shows like Parks and Recreation and Summer Heights High. I personally stopped watching The Office after Steve Carell left, but I did read that the documentary element becomes like an actual plot point in the final season. So let me know in the comments if you've seen that and if you think it worked. And speaking of twists in the mockumentary form, I do have to take this time to talk about my favorite TV show of all time, The Comeback. The show follows Valerie Cherish, an actress who was on a kind of bad sitcom in the 90s and gets cast in a new sitcom with a reality show charting her comeback to the limelight. The twist with this show is that you as the viewer are watching the raw footage of the reality show that she's filming. The show touches on the corrosive nature of fame and the desire for attention, and it's a brilliantly written and performed satire of Hollywood and reality TV. The first season has a very harsh and grating and at times downright ugly aesthetic that really works to highlight the reality of reality TV. The thing I love about this show is that the premise of it creates so many layers to the show itself and to Lisa Kudrow's performance. Valerie is someone who's always conscious of the cameras and how she's coming across, which makes the moments where she slips up and accidentally lets something real through even more compelling.
Well, I got it! All right, you can't use that.
The series also comes up with some really clever and inventive ways of using this format throughout the 3 seasons, where you're sometimes watching iPhone footage or a screen within a screen or even surveillance footage. Since this period in 2005 to 2007-ish, there have been a few mockumentary films that were popular. There was What We Do in the Shadows and even an Oscar-nominated sequel to Borat, and the trend is continuing on television with Abbott Elementary and a 3rd season of The Comeback. And that that brings us to 2026, when you have this extremely rare occurrence of 2 mockumentary films being in cinemas at once. Nirvana the band, the show, the movie uses the mockumentary format to ground its outlandish plot in reality. In the film, Matt and Jay travel back to 2008 in their caravan and try and use the opportunity to land a show at the Rivoli Theatre. They do something really amazing in this film in that they seamlessly insert themselves into footage that was shot in 2008. They even have conversations with the 2008 versions of themselves, and they pull it off so flawlessly that I still don't even really understand how they did all of it. The mockumentary format also allows them to do the Borat type thing, where parts of it are clearly unscripted and involve members of the public, which gives the film an alive and chaotic feel. I also love how unexpected the use of special effects is in this. Most of it looks really good, especially considering the low budget that they were working with, and the shaky documentary cam actually just works to sell the effects even more. This movie was such a nice surprise for me. I'd never even seen the show, but I found the movie to be really funny and inventive. And now that brings me to The Moment. This film follows Charli XCX as she navigates Brat Summer and prepares for her world tour. It presents an imagined history of this period and what would have happened if Charli made different choices. The film is mainly about Charli being pressured to sell out by her label and the people around her, and to really capitalize on the success of Brat by making herself a more commercial artist. She has to deal with crazy label execs, endless promo, and a difficult Alexander Skarsgård as her tour director. The film came about when Charli was being asked about making a big tour documentary or a concert film, and instead decided to make a satirical mockumentary. The film definitely takes a lot of inspiration from things like A Hard Day's Night and Spinal Tap and Spice World, but they just kind of update it for the times. They really lean into the documentary look here as well, and they try and make things look a bit raw and ugly. Overall, I found this film to be pretty funny and interesting, but a bit of a mixed bag at times. There are elements of it that really work, like when Charli is making fun of her own persona as an artist. Like there's the Brat bank card that's only for gay people, and her driver playing the boom clap video in front of her. And also Kate Blanchett and Rachel Sennett are very funny in the film. But I do have to say, a lot of this film felt very undercooked. It's all a bit vaguely drawn, and you never really get a sense of what's driving Charli to make the choices that she's making. She's always just kind of reacting to what's in front of her at that point in time. An artist being pressured into being more commercial is a pretty well-worn tale at this point in time, and I think that Charli's music actually explores this theme a lot better than it was explored in the film. A lot of scenes seem to go by without any discernible point, or have a lot of what feels like first draft of jokes. And the biggest sin of this film is that it's 1 hour and 43 minutes long. I love a long movie, but a mockumentary should never ever be longer than 90 minutes. Ideally, they should be 86 minutes. Scientifically, 86 minutes is the perfect length for a mockumentary. I've done the research. I have a feeling that a lot of my complaints about this movie stem from the fact that it was made very quickly. They reportedly wrote the script in 10 days and filmed it within a very short period of time. I sort of get the feeling that this was one of those things where they could either make it quickly or it wouldn't have been made at all. So I do think it's cool to have this historical document of what it was like for Charli to be on the inside of Brat Summer, and I'd definitely take something like this over a stock standard music documentary any day. Even though the execution wasn't totally there, I do really admire Charli's desire to do something cool and different, and it makes me hope that other artists maybe try something similar. Like, when are we getting the Zara Larsson mockumentary? I do sort of think that the genre is in a unique position to comment on representation in today's world. We live in an age where everyone is hyper aware of cameras and having to perform on social media. So a mockumentary made by someone whose entire life is shaped by that, like Charli XCX or Lisa Kudrow, is in a great position to bring an insightful perspective on these themes that dominate society at the moment. I do think for the genre to survive, it still needs to be presented with a slight twist, like they do in The Comeback or Nirvana the band, the show, the movie. And in order to break through on film, you really need to mix up the content and the aesthetic. Overall, I think the genre still has some juice in it. It just needs a bit of a jolt. And maybe Nirvana the band, the show, the movie, and The Moment will do that. If you have a favorite mockumentary that I didn't mention in this video, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And thank you for watching. Bye!